So furthering our exploration of my Uncle Tom's tackle box, we're going to take a deeper dive into some of the equipment, the lures, the plugs, the tackle that he's got in this thing. And in the process of cleaning out my uncle's home, we were able to find, my brothers and I, not only my Uncle Tom's box, but my Uncle Bill's box as well, and my grandfather's. So we've got some lures that are dating way back here, some stuff to take a look at that's going to be really cool for some of you, I think, and just like it is for me as I open these things up for the very first time. And we got my uncle's more modern box to check out, too. Now, we got a long New England winter coming. We're going to get out, we're going to ice fish, we're going to have other things to do, but I expect I'm going to be able to make some pretty good videos of investigating the tease tackle box, and maybe even next spring or summer take some of the lures out and hit the rivers, hit the lakes, hit the ponds with the real old school equipment. So let's check it out. So trying to make some sense out of his box, I guess we're going to have to start with the top tray right here. And we see in the top tray a variety of spinnerbaits. Now these spinnerbaits have not seen the water in a long time. The skirts have fallen off. Got a couple different ones, probably from the late 80s, early 80s here. But no skirts. Then I've got this, and I imagine this bait comes from the 1960s, maybe even the 1950s. And what we're talking about is a weedless hook dressed with a swivel and a little blade on the back. Then there's a vinyl skirt with a bead, and around that is a clevis and a spinner, and then a keeled sinker to get this thing down. So this is weedless, and it's going to move through the water, through the weeds. This is something else. I'd have to investigate this. Maybe some of you know what we're looking at here, but I for one, don't. I just know that it probably would work if we're going to pitch this in the lily pads. Now, in the same tray, he's got some of these buzzers. And you've probably used buzzers before. When you first buy them and you're a kid, you don't know how to use them. You reel them in all different sorts of ways. But these are designed to be cast and pulled across the top of the water, creating all kinds of commotion. This one's particularly interesting because it's a spoon with a double propeller blade on the top. And I bet you this would stay up real easy. He was a fan of a buzzer that could stay on the top of the water easy. And he liked this one. This has got that old vinyl skirt, and you can see it's got a lighter blade, so this one stayed up, and I remember he liked this. And he also liked this one because it's got this blade that cuts through the water pretty easily, although he stopped using these in the late 80s. But these are all buzzers. They're probably in your box right now. These are some of the early iterations of the buzzer. Now, from the last episode I did on T's box, we talked a lot about the jitterbug. He was a fan of anything that he could use on the surface. Here's an old rubber frog, and I remember using these. They're hard to hook a fish with, but they are pretty weedless. And I believe these came out in the late 70s. Of course, there's a collection of jitterbugs in this box, and since we've already talked about them, we're not going to talk about them too much. The double-jointed jitterbug and the traditional coach jaw jitterbug were featured in the last episode, but these two here are interesting because these are knockoff jitterbugs. They're made of wood, and I remember that we got these at one of the fishing and hunting shows in the Northeast, and you probably had a fishing and hunting show in your area in January or February. The cool thing about this is it's like a regular jitterbug, but you could turn the cup upside down and get this thing to actually dive down into the water. So you could work it as a surface plug. You could make it run off to the side. You could make it run off to the other side, or you could actually make it dive. So this guy and his companion are kind of a cool idea, but a knockoff jitterbug. My uncle was a huge fan of catching, and it didn't always have to be bass. And you can see one of his favorite spinners in my hand here. These are called Rooster tails. And there's some small ones, a larger one that you might have used for bass. And then this interesting one, and I remember when this came out in the mid-70s, and it's got the spinner on an arm. So it's almost a rooster tail that works like a spinner bait. And he's got several of these that are still in the package. So the rooster tail still being thrown by anglers for a variety of fish, especially trout. My uncle was a big fan. Digging around in that box, there's some surprises. And here's a surprise right here. Now, what is this? It's a rubber head that covers a piece of lead. Hook is embedded, jig head. But then this thing has got legs coming out up top, and it's got a little float with more rubber tail in the back. So this jig-like critter, God, I bet you could take this thing out today and throw it around the lily pads or the rocks, and it's going to mimic a crayfish, and I'll bet you're going to catch fish on it. I have no idea what this is called. Do you? Because, you know what? There's this and several others like it in my uncle's box. Now we have dueling minnow baits. Now my uncle was a huge advocate of the jolted Rapala. And he liked it in perch, and he liked it in gold with a black back, and he liked it in this orange color here. He missed a massive brown trout on this particular bait once in a nearby reservoir. And this is one of those J11 Rapalas made in Finland. It probably cost $12 now. I remember they were expensive back in the 70s. They were like $3.99. But the J11. And the J11 is taking on the Rebel Minnow. Now, it came with 3 hooks, but you can see my uncle removed the middle hook. He probably wanted a better action. But you can see this is one of those chrome-plated Rebels that's got that color underneath, clearly from the early 70s or even late 60s. And then here's a product of the maybe 1975, 76, that naturalized style Rebel that came out at the time. And there was a huge naturalized bait phase, plug phase back in the mid-70s. So here you got the baby bass Rebel. And we would always, in our family, which is better, the Rapala or the Rebel? And I had a couple cousins that liked the Rebels. I tended to come down on the side of the Rapala. The thing about the Rebels are they cast a little farther than the Rapala. That might be an advantage that the Rebel has. Rapalas typically are light because they're made of balsa wood. My uncle, he came down squarely with the jolted Rapala. Next out of the box are a couple of prop baits. The Devil's Horse by Smithwick. And I believe this is a Heddon. It's covered with that, what we call lure disease. These propeller baits float, and you jerk your rod and you make them sputter, and they will work today. You'll go out and catch fish with them today. I always recommend taking off one of the hooks, although sometimes they're balanced and that'll mess the pop of the prop wash off a little bit. But they're surface plugs, so they're going to be in my uncle's box. This particular one that I'm holding has got to be from the mid-60s, I would imagine. It's just got that feel. The plastic's quite different. This is probably from the 70s. My uncle was a huge fan of Arbogast. Fred Arbogast. Anything by Fred Arbogast. Probably because of the jitterbug. This is an Arbogast deep diver. Very covered with that lure disease. I imagine it's a coach dog in color if I were to scrape it down, white and black. This big metal lip on it. So this sucker would probably dive about 6 feet deep right now. Here's another classic Arbogast lure that you probably recognize. The Hula Popper. One one of the first poppers in the orange with black dots. What a color this is. You can cast them a long way. They have a great big pop. My uncle liked the hula popper. And then finally, we've got the sputterbug, the Arbogast version of the propeller lure with a large propeller up front riding on a piece of wire and the body of the plug with two trebles and a skirt, which is decayed. My uncle's got quite a collection. And here's some of the lures that he would have definitely been throwing in the early 70s when they went out on a rampage on Otis Reservoir and many other western Mass lakes. This old tackle box really is like a fossil dig. Here's another Fred Arbogast lure that is actually called, I believe, the Arbogaster. Although I don't think so. The Arbogaster had a metal bill. This is Fred Arbogast, but I don't remember the name of this guy. We could probably investigate it and find it pretty easily. It's got the skirt on the back. Arbogast always loved to put a skirt on. And you can see that it was a greenish, maybe perch, maybe, I don't know. And here we have the Fat Wrap. When Rapala decided to go with a deeper diving crankbait, because these were individually tank tuned, a lot of bass guys swore by the Fat Wrap. They could get it down, it ran straight, it ran true, and you could control the depth with these things pretty easily. They're fairly weedless. They bang off the bottom, and the hooks stay up. So you can use these things in some pretty rough cover and not get hung up. We took a look at the jitterbugs last time in T's box. Now we're taking a look at these Heddon lures. And here's a Heddon. I believe this would have originally had a propeller on the back. It's called the Medium Magnum Torpedo. And I believe there was a propeller there that my uncle might have taken off because he wanted to turn this thing into a kind of a Zara spook. You know that when you jerk the spook, you can make it go off to one side and the other and the other, and that's called walking the dog. So when the T discovered the Zara spook, he probably saw this with its cool coloration. I mean, they did make spooks this color, but I think he probably said, that's a smaller size, I'm going to give that one a shot. So he did a little bit of doctoring of the lure. Here's another one by Heddon, and you probably remember this if you're a fan of bass fishing. This is the Crazy Crawler, which is something like a jitterbug, and boom, 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 it goes through the water. Makes a lot of commotion at night, and I'm telling you, you go out today with this thing, and you're going to catch fish with it right now. And this is, we've got to read it, it's the Heddon Prowler. And this is like a fish on its side with the hooks mounted on the bottom, and it works with a side-to-side action like a typical crankbait, but it's got the gimmick of being a dead fish, presenting the profile of a wounded fish to fish down below. Heddon and Arbogast were dueling basically for 35, 40 years in the topwater plug world. Meanwhile, Rebel and Rapala were dueling just below with the minnow baits. So all that talk about the plugs, my uncle's also got quite a few daredevils in his box, as you can see, and he's got, looks like the heck is this, an Al's Goldfish. You guys probably know your Al's Goldfish. Come in all kinds of sizes. This one he would have used in the lakes, but they come in stream sizes. The daredevils, still a big selling lure for pike and for muskie and pickerel. And there's the more normally shaped daredevils right here in that crazy alligator bullfrog color. And then, wow, I see these in saltwater. I didn't know they made freshwater sizes, something like a Johnson silver minnow. Daredevils. And the next time I see you, we're going to, maybe not the next time, but soon we'll take a look at the other side and the trays on the other side of his box. Before I leave, though, how about that? Wouldn't you love to throw that thing out and see what that does? And one thing I can guarantee that will do is twist your line. But back in the 50s, when that sucker was made, all bets were off. You just came up with a good idea and you threw it.